I think one of the hardest things to do in gaming is to create a great FPS campaign. You've got to nail the gunplay and gameplay, the AI can't be brain dead, the story has to matter or at least not make people roll their eyes too hard, and on top of that, these games are expensive. Huge levels, big set pieces, explosions everywhere. It's the kind of production that can sink a studio. And it's no wonder that most FPS campaigns are generally kind of boilerplate or boring. But the ones that do hit, the ones that get everything right, those experiences stick with you for years, sometimes decades. So here is my top 10 list for the greatest FPS campaigns ever made, starting with number 10, Metro Exodus. Now, the Metro series was always described as a spiritual successor to Stalker, yet the first two games were claustrophobic, with tight tunnels, narrow corridors, incredible atmosphere, but just not much room to actually explore. Sure, you'd get the occasional side path, a hidden stash, a branching hallway, but for the most part those games were carefully guided rides, extremely well designed ones, but built on level design and cinematic set pieces that made the world feel a bit bigger than it actually was. And then along came Metro Exodus that had the crazy concept of, well, what if we played on the surface? And everything changed for the franchise. Artistically, the game was allowed to breathe and explore a much grander and probably much higher budget experience. Open wastelands, frozen rivers, rusted ship graveyards, deserted villages swallowed by the sand. You finally got a real sense of just how catastrophically devastated the world actually was. Now, of course, and pretty much by obligation, the game had to bring you back underground now and then. Those classic Metro tunnels are still there, but for most of the time you are out in the wild. And amazingly, even without that same claustrophobia, Exodus never loses the tension that the first games had. Ammo is still incredibly scarce. Your gas mask will crack at the worst possible moment. You'll hear something screaming in the fog and immediately question every life decision that brought you there. Now, Exodus is a much slower game than most shooters on this list, deliberately so. Exodus forces you to think before every encounter. Do you spend the ammo? Do you risk stealth? Do you just avoid the fight entirely? It walks a near perfect line of letting you soak in the atmosphere and absolutely punishing you when you get a little too careless. Exodus took many of my favorite world crafting and survival elements from Stalker, and they put it in a far more accessible, or dare I say, appealing package for the average gamer. But once it's got its hooks in you, there's no way you're stopping until you get to the end. Number 9 on this list is possibly one of the most influential FPS campaigns ever made, and that is Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare, a game that may feel cliche by today's standards. Gruff military dudes whispering in your ear, crawling through tall grass, big cinematic explosions every 10 minutes. But here's the thing, it only feels cliche because virtually every game copied it. Before Modern Warfare, barely any shooters were doing blockbuster pacing like this. Infinity Ward had been building toward it with the earlier Call of Duty games, but this was one that detonated into mainstream gaming unlike anything before. I don't remember a single gamer in 2007 who wasn't playing COD 4. It had missions that I think people had always imagined would be in games, but they finally delivered it and probably exceeded everyone's expectations. The mission All Gillied Up, that's burned into everyone's memories. Crawling through enemy lines, holding your breath while a patrol walks inches from your face, lining up for that perfect sniper shot. Not only was it incredibly cinematic, but it proved that Call of Duty could do tension just as well as it could do chaos. And when they went for that chaos, it hit hard. That nuke scene, at the time, it was shocking. You weren't the hero riding off into the sunset, you were literally caught in the blast. And what about that AC-130 mission? That was the first time anyone did that. It became a template that's been recreated and reskinned in dozens of games since. Modern Warfare wasn't cliche, it was the blueprint. It blended action movie spectacle with tight FPS gameplay so well that the industry chased it for the next decade. Sometimes successfully, sometimes not, but there are few games that came close to achieving those highs. Pick number 8 is without question the smartest game on this list, and that is Prey. And yes, I am on a mission to get more people to play this criminally overlooked gem from 2017. Honestly, I'd rank it above BioShock if I wasn't afraid of public execution. To me, Prey is like the sci-fi evolution of BioShock. Better puzzles, more systemic freedom, and amazing zero-G sequences that I just absolutely love. You wake up on Talos, a space station orbiting the moon. Something, of course, has gone very wrong and everything might be a mimic. That coffee mug? Possibly a mimic. That chair? Also, potentially a mimic. You get the glue gun, which is one of the coolest utility weapons in any FPS. You use it to patch leaks, freeze enemies, and literally build your own staircase to reach places you probably weren't meant to get to. And the mimics, well, they start off a bit annoying and jump scary, then they become unsettling, then just straight up terrifying. The game keeps your resources light, so you're constantly debating whether to burn your ammo on an enemy or risk smacking something with a wrench, and somehow that tension never really goes away. And what I love most about Prey is that underneath the narrative, which is excellent by the way, it never forces you down a narrow path. It doesn't babysit you, it doesn't highlight every objective in bright neon. It hands you a toolbox and says, all right, you figure it out. And when you do, it's one of the most rewarding FPS campaigns out there. And yeah, it absolutely still holds up today. Number 7 is an easy one to add to this list, and that is Doom 2016. For a lot of FPS gamers, Doom died back in 2004 when they released Doom 3. The franchise that basically invented fast, aggressive, demon-slaying chaos got turned into a slower, darker survival horror experience. And while Doom 3 absolutely had its fans, and to be fair, its strengths, it wasn't what classic Doom players were craving. They wanted speed, they wanted chaos, they wanted to rip and tear. And they only had to wait another 12 years after development hell, false starts, and radio silence, then they finally got what they wanted. Doom 2016 didn't just revive the franchise, it kicked the entire FPS genre in its teeth. No reload button, no chest high cover, no walking slowly while somebody yells expositions at you. Just fast movement, power-ups, arena combat, and an arsenal of absolutely ridiculous weapons. And somehow it felt both old school and completely modern. The controls were razor sharp, the performance was absurdly optimized. This thing ran on machines that had no business making games look this good, and then there was, of course, the soundtrack. It was just you, McGordon's epic industrial metal, and a room full of demons that existed purely to be dismembered. Glory kills weren't just flashy, they were functional. You needed them. The combat fed into itself, and that's what made it so special. Doom 2016 had one of the tightest combat loops ever made. You weren't hiding from enemies, you were the threat. Health, ammo, armor, it all comes from your aggression. The game forces you to stay in motion, to stay engaged, to enter a bloody flow state. And looking back now, it's obvious just how much of an impact it had. You can see its DNA all over modern shooters. The mobility, the arena pacing, the emphasis on mechanical mastery. This was one of the best and least expected comeback stories in gaming, and it's still worth going back to if you haven't played it. Number 6 on this list was a game that was so far ahead of its time, well, you could barely even play it. Crysis is probably remembered most for one thing: absolutely melting PCs. Can It Run Crysis wasn't just a meme, it was a benchmark for like 10 years. But if you could actually run the game, which thankfully I could at the time, underneath all of that tech flex was one of the most satisfying combat sandboxes anyone ever made. Yeah, the story was a bit cheesy. Military guys yelling about glowy aliens and super contrived plot points, but none of that really mattered once they dropped you onto a tropical island with an Iron Man style nanosuit and AI enemies that actually fought back. Crysis is one of the ultimate don't judge a book by its cover expressions in gaming. The marketing portrayed it as a simple action shoot 'em up on the surface, but as a player you were given more choices than I can remember any single player FPS ever having. With multiple kilometers between you and your objective, you have choices. Do you take a boat and risk getting spotted out on the open water? Do you ghost through the jungle, snapping necks one by one? Or do you go full chaos mode and start leveling huts and trees and vehicles just because you can? And the mechanics were actually amazing. Once you took the time to learn the nanosuit, flipping between cloak, armor, strength, and speed on instinct, you stopped feeling like a soldier and started feeling like a freaking predator. And the best part, the game never told you how to play. Unlike its sequels, this game never forced you into a stealth mission. It rarely forced vehicles upon you. It just dropped you into these big combat arenas, said, good luck, you can use the tools if you want, or you can make it challenging on yourself and just go in with your suit alone. It was honestly one of my favorite games to actually fail a mission on, because then I could try it from a completely different angle, take a different route, different strategy, different energy entirely. Crysis was doing open-ended sandbox combat before that was even a marketing point. It was the ultimate power fantasy, and it required the ultimate power just to play it, but if you got it up and running, this game was a real treat. Now, number 5 is another game that just simply has to be on this list, and that is Stalker, one of the earliest truly immersive FPS games. The second you step into the zone, you understand something important. You are not the hero in this game. You're just a scavenger, a nobody, a stalker trying to survive just one more day. You'll be dead in the first 10 minutes because you underestimated a pack of wild dogs. Stalker exists to put you in your place the second you let your guard down. And that's part of what makes the world feel so real. It doesn't feel like it's catered for you to survive in. It feels like it's just a world existing and you happen to be in there. NPCs aren't just standing around waiting for quests to trigger. They travel, they trade, they fight, they even die whether you're there or not. The world feels alive, and especially when the game was first released, there was nothing else even remotely like it. Stalker made radiation and hunger just as big of a threat as the mind-flaying mutants that would try and hunt you. Your rusty, poorly maintained AK jamming at the worst possible moments is essentially the Stalker experience. The roughness of the experience, the fact that it didn't feel like it was perfectly designed was part of its charm. The world felt real because it was flawed. This game influenced so many gamers and even movies. There's countless games that followed in its footsteps, even some on this list. And even the biggest shooters today, like Escape from Tarkov or Ark Raiders, owe a massive deal of their inspiration to this game, and even the book that it was based on. But any of the games that you pick up today that follow in Stalker's footsteps will never quite truly recreate the uniquely unforgiving nature of the original game. And that's in part why it still belongs on this list. Number 4 is another easy choice. Would you kindly admit that BioShock changed everything? Back in the early 2000s, immersive sim shooters were kind of niche. Deus Ex, System Shock, Thief, amazing games on their own right, but you kind of had to be in the know. You weren't hearing every gamer talk about these titles as must-plays. But then BioShock showed up in 2007 and blew the doors off of the narrative gaming world. Rapture wasn't just a cool setting, it was an unforgettable location. I remember it clearly, seeing the world for the first time, a full city at the bottom of the ocean, Art Deco skyscrapers, neon lights flickering through the seawater, giant glass walls separating you from the crushing deep, and of course, you arrive after it's all fallen apart. A utopia collapsed, civil war broke out, genetic experiments turned citizens into splicer maniacs. Every hallway of the city tells a gruesome story. The gameplay of BioShock streamlined the immersive sim ideas without dumbing them down. Plasmids let you shoot lightning, freeze enemies, set traps, customize the way you played, all while still juggling guns and, of course, your trusty wrench. It didn't over-explain itself. It trusted you to experiment, to listen, to pay attention. And the story was incredible. It was bold, philosophical, even messy at bits, with an, of course, legendary twist. BioShock didn't just give us a great campaign, it gave us one of the most iconic worlds in gaming. And in my opinion, Rapture as a game environment still hasn't been topped. Number 3 is possibly one of the most predictable titles on this list, and that is Halo Combat Evolved. Halo was basically ground zero for the modern console FPS. Before Halo, honestly, the shooter genre on consoles was all over the place. The controls for Halo were so good, the mechanics so spot on that every other game decided to follow in its footsteps. And it didn't just launched the Xbox platform. It was the reason to own an Xbox. It brought serious online play to consoles. It redefined what we thought of as sandbox combat. It gave enemies actual personalities and tactics, and it introduced Master Chief, gaming's most iconic super soldier. This was Bungie's masterpiece. But Halo wasn't just its mechanics alone. It proved that an FPS could also tell a massive scale story. The mysteries of an enormous ring world and ancient alien threats. Bungie knocked it out of the park with a real sci-fi epic, and a universe that fans simply couldn't get enough of. Cortana, the Covenant, the Flood. I must have played through the campaign at least a dozen times, and it helped that you could also play it co-op and ramp up the difficulty and sit on the couch and play next to your best buds. Now, naturally, the multiplayer became legendary. Your merit as a gamer back in the day relied on your Halo skills at the Xbox LAN parties. But even if the multiplayer did seem to ultimately take over the narrative, the campaign is what really hooked everybody first. People bought Halo for the story, for the split-screen co-op where you drove the Warthog and your friend fired the chain gun on the back. Halo outdid what was happening on PCs, and they made it available to anyone with an Xbox, and it's still one of the greatest and most nostalgic campaigns you can play today. Now, perhaps predictably, number 2 is indeed Half-Life 2. The original Half-Life was a true turning point for gaming, iconic in its own right. Games were starting to feel more grounded, more physical, and Half-Life didn't just inch the genre forward, it jumped. Enemy AI that actually reacted to you, Marines flanked through grenades, adapted, called out to each other, the level design encouraged movement and improvisation, and the pacing was masterful. But as important as Half-Life was, Half-Life 2 is where Valve perfected the formula with their new Source engine and crazy physics engine. Now, physics weren't just a gimmick in Half-Life 2, they were kind of the foundation of the whole world. One of your primary weapons is the gravity gun, which you can use to pick up ordinary objects and turn them into, well, you didn't really turn them into anything. You just shot them across the room and they killed people, and it was awesome. You didn't just have to slowly drag crates around, you could pick them up and launch them across the room, along with radiators and toilets to take off the heads of your enemies. You could catch saw blades in midair and use them to chop guys in half. They made physics playful while still grounding it in reality with some weird kind of retro sci-fi tech and a very compelling sci-fi story. City 17 is still this haunting vision of this hybrid Orwellian nightmare where you can't step out of line, but also aliens are involved. The city feels oppressed and lived in. Half-Life 2 never makes you doubt the reality of its world. The Combine don't just exist as some enemies that you have to defeat each level. They feel like a contaminating force embedded in the world, one that you have no chance of defeating, not even close to. And as you move further out into the game world, the scale of that threat just keeps expanding. And one of the most understated, but in my opinion, most impressive aspects of the game, a lesson that I wish more games would learn from Half-Life 2, is that the game never takes the control away from you. There's no traditional cutscenes, the story moments happen in real time. You're always there, always present, always in control. Masterfully timed sound cues will pull your attention to look at something just in time for a cool set piece to trigger. It makes you feel like you're in the world and you just happen to be witnessing all this crazy stuff as it occurs, as opposed to somebody grabbing your head and saying, hey, look over here. Valve absolutely cooked with Half-Life 2. It is a masterpiece of a game, and decades later, people are still begging to know what happens next. Now, before getting to number 1, let me just say that all the games on this list are fantastic. They could be listed in a bunch of different orders, and I think I would still more or less agree, but there is one game on this list that I think just deserves the title of a perfect FPS campaign, and that is Titanfall 2. With the first Titanfall only being a multiplayer experience, fans were naturally skeptical of Titanfall 2 trying to tag on a campaign. On paper, it sounded like it could just be a throwaway marketing plug, a bonus mode, something you could click before jumping into the online mode. It was not that. Titanfall 2's campaign is one of the tightest and best paced gaming experiences out there. No filler, no padding, every single level introduces a new mechanic, explores it fully, and then moves on before it gets old. There's time-shifting combat, factory assembly line platforming, giant robot titan battles that actually feel weighty and powerful. It never repeats itself and it never coasts. It just keeps delivering stunning experience after stunning experience. And somehow, in just 6 hours, it makes you care more about a giant robot than most games make you feel about anyone in their cast. BT's simple, "trust me" line starts off feeling a bit procedural, like something a machine would say because it's programmed to. But by the end, that line hits like a freight train. The relationship between Cooper and BT works because it's earned. The gameplay builds the bond, the missions build trust. It's one of the most successfully developed character relations in any FPS game I can think of. Titanfall 2 felt like the studio was swinging for the fences. No safety net, no compromise, just pure, focused vision. The multiplayer component might have been where people spent most of their time, but the campaign? Well, honestly, I think that's why people are still asking for Titanfall 3 all these years later. Let me know in the comments what you think about my list. Is it spot on, or would you add your own games up here? Up next, check out the latest devlog for a game that I'm making called C-Beams. Hopefully I can inject some of the lessons I've learned over the years and give it a great campaign as well. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. This is Level Cap, signing off.